please. वही चली गई है. So anyways, Bhagavad means Bhagwan, the Supreme Lord, and Gita means song. So literally Bhagavad Gita means the song of the Supreme Lord. It is so sweet. He has actually sung it. And imagine standing on a battlefield on the verge of a world war and you're singing. So it is the song of God and it is the essence of all Vedic knowledge. It's the most important Upanishad. So having read the Bhagavad Gita, there really is no need to read the Vedas or the Upanishads. So there are three divisions of knowledge. उसे प्रस्थान त्रय बोलते हैं. Traya means three, and divisions of knowledge is prasthan. So the three divisions, we had done this also initially, that is Shruti, Smriti and Nyay, Prasthan. Which means के knowledge transfer करने के तीन तरीके थे. Earlier it was Shruti. Shruti मतलब केवल जो ऋषिज थे, they used to speak the knowledge of the Vedas in the Gurukuls, and just by hearing once, the children used to retain it for the rest of their life. There were no books. There never was any need to write it down because memory was so strong, so sharp. So Shruti के माध्यम से इनको pass down किया गया from one generation to the other. The father spoke it to the son then spoke it to his son, and that's how the parampara carried on. This is how the hearing Upanishads and the Vedic instructions carried on. And then as the ages were degrading, because time is degradation, Kal is degradation, nothing remains the same. As time progresses, things degrade. They don't get younger, they only get older. This is the nature of the material world. So after Shruti, when Satyug and Treta Yuga and Dwapar Yuga had passed by, it was time for Kali Yuga to come, there was the need for Smriti Prasthan, which means that just by remembering what they had heard, they were able to pass it on. So all the Purans, the Mahabharats, all these itihasas were handed down to the coming generations by Smriti. Shukdev Goswami ne jo Parikshit Maharaj ko sunaya. And then all the sages that was sitting at Naimisharanya were hearing it. They then, from what they had heard from Shukdev Goswami, they passed it on to their disciples. Those disciples, having heard it from their teacher, passed it on further to their disciples. This is called Smriti Prasthan. And then there is also another way of transmitting knowledge, which is Nyay Prasthan. These are, Nyay means grammar. So by logic. Current generation prides itself on saying that they only accept things on the basis of logic or scientific understanding or proof. But this is not something that they have invented or that is prevalent only in their generation. This was there even thousands of years ago. There already was a Nyay Prasthan, a logic based understanding of the Vedas, and they were meant to be transmitted through Vedant Sutra and Brahma Sutra. Sutras are again summary studies. So a sutra on the Vedant, on the entire Vedant comes from the word Vedon ka ant jahan pe hota hai. That is called Vedant. So, which means it's the culmination or the conclusion of the Vedas. Uska ek sutra, the sutras ke form mein, like aphorisms, के form में this knowledge, the Vedic knowledge, was transmitted. So the transmission was never meant to stop. This was designed by Krishna himself, that once the world was designed, the knowledge on how to operate this world was also handed down, was first produced and then was handed down for the welfare of the human society. So can we have the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is how Bhagavad Gita came about. it was passed down as a smriti within a shruti. So Bhagavad Gita is a part of the Mahabharata. And Mahabharata, how was Mahabharata handed down to us? As a smriti. So Bhagavad Gita is a shruti within a smriti. श्रुति क्यों है? क्योंकि भगवान श्री कृष्ण ने इसको अर्जुन को सुनाया. So Arjun heard it, and then Arjun passed on this information. Vyasadeva heard it, and then he passed it on further to his son, and that's how the transmission of knowledge continued. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is unique in its feature. Now, why Bhagavad Gita as it is? Because there are more than now. कुछ साल पहले तक शायद 600-700 commentaries थी भगवद गीता की. अब तो और surge हो गई हैं. You know, I think there are more than 900 or 1000 commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. So there are many commentaries available in the market today. So why this edition, Bhagavad Gita as it is, and why not the others? Because most of them, or we can safely say that almost none of them are strictly authoritative, because in all of them the commentator has expressed their own opinion without touching the spirit of Bhagavad Gita as it is. There are so many commentaries of the Bhagavad Gita available in the market wherein they don't even acknowledge Krishna. They say that the spirit of the Krishna and Krishna himself are separate. They're two different entities. So they just take the science or the logic that he is giving, and then they interpret it in their own way, saying that he actually means us and our spirit. And there's no difference between us and God. We are him and he is us. And they completely disregard the speaker, Krishna himself, saying that he is a mythological figure. What is mythology? The literal meaning, word meaning of mythology is fictitious, make believe, made up. Hence, commentaries written with this premise or this foundation cannot be taken as authoritative. Certainly, they are not what Vyasadeva has meant or has translated. Can we have the next slide? Next slide, please. So the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is the vital principle. Without keeping to the sanctity, originality of this great scripture, it's like a bogus medicine. You may feel you are eating the capsule, but if it's an empty capsule, it's not going to cure you of your disease of unhappiness, distress, anxiety, depression, unless it is an authentic capsule manufactured by the company, stamped as has a mark of FASSI, a regulative authority. Only then will that medicine act upon your disease, and you may hope to get cured. So if you're reading Bhagavad Gita from an unauthorized source, it will not produce the result it is meant to produce. And it will just be like another one of those many books of fiction that you have read. So this example is also mentioned in Granth-raj Srimad Bhagavatam, that when you're taking the medicine, you have to take it exactly as prescribed by the physician. Then you cannot change the dosage. That, oh, he told me to take it thrice a day, but never mind, I'm smarter. He doesn't know my life so well. So I'm going to take it just once or every other day. And then I'm hoping to get cured or see some result in my condition. That's not going to happen. So similarly, Bhagavad Gita should be accepted exactly as directed by the speaker, Lord Shri Krishna, who establishes himself as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we'll come to the word Bhagavan also in detail. Not only this, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita has been confirmed by all that it has been validated. The supremacy, the authority of Lord Krishna has already been validated by great acharyas like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarkacharya, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, as mentioned in scripture, such as Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam and all other Purans, mention of Bhagavad Gita is there in these Purans also. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita should be taken exactly as directed by Lord Shri Krishna. Next one, please. Okay. This verse is from Vishnu Puran, 6th canto, 5th chapter, 47th verse. Aishwarasya samagrasya virasya. This is Balram font. So, not able to read it. Virasya yogashau chirayu jnana vairagyasya chaiva Krishna bhoga itegana. This verse has been written by Parashar Muni, and we did this in one of our previous classes. Would anybody like to say who is Parashar Muni?
Father of Vyasadev.
Yes. So Vyasadev learnt all the scriptures from his father Parashar Muni. So you can imagine the authority of Parashar Muni on the scriptures. So the definition of Bhagwan has been given by Parashar Muni in the Vishnu Puran. The translation is one who is full in all these 6 opulences. Which are the 6? Virasya samagasya. One who has full strength, full fame, full wealth, full knowledge, full beauty and full renunciation is Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhag means all opulences. It does not mean some opulence or part of the opulence. It means all, the sum total, the summum bonum. इसका हमने example ये भी लिया था that just as we say that अगर किसी व्यक्ति में बहुत सारे गुण होते हैं हम उसे कहते हैं गुणवान है ये बहुत. If somebody is very pretty, we say ये बहुत रूपवान है. If somebody is very strong, we say ये बहुत बलवान है. उसी तरह one who has all the opulences in full is called Bhagavan. Now I think we should all meditate on this verse a little bit, because we are so used to seeing so many people claiming themselves to be God or parts of God, or the exact editions of God. And so many people claim. It will be worthwhile to compare them to this verse of Parashar Muni. Do they have full strength? Now, I'm not saying some strength, but is there no one stronger than them? Are they the strongest, the most famous? And here we're talking about fame not just on planet Earth, in the entire galaxy. Anybody who has nobody who can surpass him in fame, in wealth? Is there anyone who can claim that he is the wealthiest in the entire planetary systems of the entire universe? Knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. Renunciation means no attachments, no strings attached. Only such a person can claim himself to be Bhagavan. And there is only one person in the entire scripture who fits this bill, and that is Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Next slide. So, in the Bhagavad Gita 4th chapter, we will see in the coming days when we reach chapter 4, Lord Krishna himself says, Evam parampara paptam, idam raj rishayo viduhu. So Krishna designed the way of transmitting knowledge himself, where this is not the first time that he's speaking the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. He's only repeating it. He's not speaking it, he's repeating it. He tells Arjuna himself that many years before, by that he means more than 40,000 or 50,000 years back, I had spoken the same exact Bhagavad Gita knowledge to Vivaswan, the sun god. And then he spoke it to his son Manu. And Manu then spoke it to his son Ikshvaku. And this is how knowledge is being transmitted from guru to disciple, and so on. So this is the way of transmitting knowledge, and this is called parampara. And with the passage of time, this parampara gets broken. time and again this parampara gets broken and Krishna has to reappear and re-speak it and re-establish the tenets of religion. Why does this happen? Why does the parampara get broken? Because of misinterpretation. After a few centuries, after a few generations, after a few dynasties, there comes a certain disciple or a certain king who does not want to follow the knowledge that has been given to him exactly as it is. And he tries to tweak it to suit his own desires. And that's where the misinterpretation starts. So the parampara has to be re-established, and that's why Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya. Wherever and whenever there is a decline in dharam, I come to re-establish it. So the Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Every few kalpas and yugas, it is spoken again. When this parampara or this dynastic transmission gets broken or gets disturbed by demoniac personalities who try to misinterpret its meaning and color it with their own imagination. Next. And we did that. What are the two very important qualities required to understand the Bhagavad Gita? Definitely not knowledge of Sanskrit, nor any kind of education. The only quality that you really need is that you have faith in Krishna. That means you are a devotee of Krishna and you are his friend. So if you are inimical towards him, if you are envious of Krishna, or if you are atheistic, you will not be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita, because since you do not believe in the person or you do not acknowledge his supremacy, you are not going to understand what he's saying, or you're going to misinterpret it in your own mind. So it's very important to treat Krishna as your friend. How this can be understood practically is that you need, these two qualities can be translated as being humble and being submissive. A humble heart is the right receptor of knowledge, any kind of knowledge, not just spiritual knowledge. If you are not humble, if you do not have humility, no teacher can teach you or give you knowledge. So the bowl of your heart has to be clean, and that cleanliness comes from the virtue or the quality of humility. And the second important quality is submissiveness. So if spiritual knowledge can be treated like pure, pristine milk, then the container to receive milk has to be squeaky clean, otherwise the milk is going to spoil. So the container of our heart has to be scrubbed clean by these two cleaning agents, humility and submissiveness. Then you can understand. You are ready to receive the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Next one. So having said that, not everybody is the same. There are always going to be different kinds of people, seekers of knowledge, and broadly they can be divided into these three categories. All of them will fit in either of these three. The first one is a Jnani. A Jnani is a spiritual seeker who believes that God is an energy, or he is a nature, Mother Nature, which means he doesn't have a personality. Everything around us is the energy of the Lord. So such a Jnani is called an impersonalist. Another form of connecting with the Lord will be as a yogi. Yogi would be a meditator, where he will be meditating within his heart and within the Paramatma feature who is residing in his heart. So he believes, or he has reached the understanding that not only is God just the energy around me, but this energy is coming from a person, a localized person, who is the super soul sitting in my heart. So I have a soul, and the soul is residing in the region of my heart. But next to my soul is another being, the super soul, who is the Paramatma, If I am the Atma, he is the Paramatma. And my relationship with him is that we are both connected with each other. I am a part of him. And I belong to him and I'm a part of him. So a yogi or a meditator tries to find God through this means, through meditating on the super soul residing within his heart. But the bhakt, a devotee who practices bhakti yoga, is considered far more advanced than a jnani or a yogi, because neither does he try to connect with him with his energy, nor does he try to connect with him as an equal, as a Paramatma or a part of a Paramatma. He tries to establish a relationship with him. And he tries to establish that relationship with him by serving him. So his mood is that of service, of humility, of submissiveness, and of trying to develop love for him or develop a relationship with him by serving him. So the position of a bhakt is far more advanced than that of a yogi or a jnani. Because service is missing in a yogic practitioner's life and in a jnani's life. So they will at best be serving their own mind and their own senses in trying to become one with God. But a bhakt feels that he can never become one with God, or he does not want to, he does not like to become one with him, but he likes to be in a position, in a servitor position where he can serve him. So very quickly he is able to establish a relationship with him, with God, with the person. So that is what is unique to Bhakti Yoga. Next. Now, these 5 rasas, the jnani and the yogi has no scope of understanding these 5 rasas. And it is unlikely that in their spiritual practice they will be able to reach this understanding, because the jnani does not even consider that God has a personality. He feels that God is just a light or an energy, a ball of energy. And I'm also a part of that ball of energy. And after my life finishes, I'm just going to go and merge into that ball. So he refuses to give a personality to that energy. And the yogi acknowledges that personality, but tries to become one with him. There is no service attitude. But a bhakt or a devotee enjoys or develops one of these 5 rasas with the Lord. And in fact, all relationships in the world that we see today can be categorized in one of these 5 categories. There is no 6th category. So let's begin with right leftmost bottom, active state, or not dasyaras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Shantras. Let's start with Shantras, the passive state. This passive state is more or less that of a jnani, where we are trying, there is the mood of that of a servant. You know that the Lord is the Almighty, the Supreme Most, and I am His servant. So he tries to serve the Lord by thinking of Him. But there really is no active participation or interaction with the Lord. So that is called a passive state. It's not an active state. It's a passive state where you do give credit that the Lord has a personality. He's a person. He has a personality. He has his own moods and needs and desires. However, you just try to be in a shant rasa state where you try to acknowledge his supremacy over you, and that you are as part and parcel, but you are in a servitor position and nothing beyond that. To understand what a passive state is, you can understand it by understanding what an active state is. So an active state, this relationship is that of a dasya ras. And a very prominent and easy to understand example of dasya ras is Hanumanji. So Hanuman, we all know that he was very powerful. In fact, he was so powerful that he could have gone and brought Sita Mata all by himself. There was no need for Lord Ram even to go. When he was sent just as a doot to find out where Sita has been kept, not only was he able to cross that ocean, and along the way all the various demons who tried to attack him and stop his progress, not only was he able to overcome that, he was able to go and challenge Ravan, जिससे Indra, the lord of the heaven, भी जिससे कांप रहा था, जिससे डरता था. He was able to challenge him, burn his Lanka, and locate where Sita Mata is, and he was ready to pick her up and bring her. He even offered that to her, but she refused, saying that no, I will wait for my Lord Sri Ram to come and take me. So you just go and give him my message that I'm highly distressed and that he should hurry up and come fast. So although he was so powerful, yet he always took the position of that of a das. And just to give an example of how devoted he was to Lord Ram and to the desires of Lord Ram, to the mood of Lord Ram, that when he was challenged once do you think you are the greatest? Can you show whether he's really residing in your heart? He was actually able to tear open his heart and show them physically, literally, that he's always remembering Lord Ram and Sita Mata with every breath and every moment of his life. So this is the mood of that of a Dasya Ras, which is not there in Shantras. So either we have a relationship with the Lord as a Shantras, or we have a relationship. Shantras can be understood as the trees that are in Vrindavan, or the Bansuri that Krishna is playing. They play their role whenever Krishna picks them up or wants them to do something, and that's about it. But Hanuman goes out of his way to please him. You know, he cries when the Lord cries. When he's sad, he asks him, why are you sad? What can I do to alleviate your sadness? Is there anything I can do? How can I serve you? He's always looking for an opportunity to serve him, just to please him. So this is Dasya Ras. Higher above, so these are stages. The first stage, the lowest stage, is that of Shantras. Higher than that is Dasya. Higher than that is Sakhya Ras. Sakhya is, as the word literally means, that of a friend. And Arjun is a very big example of Sakhya Ras. He treated Krishna like his friend. In fact, when Krishna reveals the Bhagavad Gita to him on the battlefield, he suddenly realizes the magnanimity and the supremacy and the sheer greatness of Krishna. And immediately he folds his hand and says, Krishna, I treated you like a friend. We used to lie down on the same bed, joking so many times. I would taunt you jokingly, on something that you have said. Or I would, defeat you in a game and then make fun of that. And how could I ever do that? You are actually the Supreme Lord. So then immediately Krishna says, I love that friendship with you. Please do not be in awe of what I have shown you right now.
Sorry, Vanita, just to interrupt. Veggie is waiting, so Vinu, please usko entry do. She is waiting.
Okay. हो गया. It's done.
कब से वेट कर रही थी वो? Okay, welcome Veggie. I hope you didn't have to wait long.
नो बस अभी एक मिनट के लिए करा होगा.
चलिए, कोई बात नहीं. So this is Sakhya Ras, where the devotee has the feeling of, has a relationship of a friend with the Lord. And as a friend, he is his well-wisher. He's forever wishing him well. And in Vrindavan, all the Gopas, the boyfriends of Krishna, are forever trying to please him. When they all tie their lunch boxes and go with him, गाय चराने जब जाते हैं, तो जब lunch time होता है, each Gopa is trying to share his lunch with Krishna first. You know, although they are all tired and hungry, all of them want Krishna to first eat what they have brought. And when Krishna is happy, automatically they become happy and become satisfied. They forget to eat it themselves. So they're playing games with him. Sometimes they are punishing him if he's the denner. जैसे हम बच्चों को खेलता देखते हैं. If he's asked to give the den, and if he cheats, if Krishna cheats, then they tell him, we're not going to let you play. You will be given a time out. You stay out, you're not playing the next game. You know, so this Krishna loves this relationship, you know, as a friend, where they are not in awe of him all the time, yet they love him like a friend. So this is Sakhya Ras. Higher than that is Vatsalya Ras. Vatsalya Ras is parental love, that which Yashoda Mata feels for her son. You know, so the rishis asked her one time that, have you seen God? Do you know what God looks like? Have you met him? She said, no, I don't have. Where do you think I have a chance? I don't think I can ever understand who God is or meet him, because I just can't find time or tear my mind away from my child Govind. He consumes my mind, my thoughts, every single moment of the day. I'm just thinking of my Govind, my Kanha, of what shall I cook for him, what clothes should I wear. She used to change his clothes multiple times a day. She just couldn't have enough of pampering him, you know. So she tells the rishis that, you know, where is the time for me to find out who God is and search for him and think about him, because I just can't stop thinking about my own child. So this is Vatsalya Ras, where she loves him to bits. And Krishna loves that. He loves it to be pampered with love. And he enjoys that Vatsalya Ras, that of a mother's. So among all the mothers, I think Yashoda is the pinnacle of motherhood. So this is an example of Vatsalya Ras. And the highest, above Vatsalya Ras, is Madhurya Ras. So in fact, Yashoda's position comes only after Radharani's position. We all know that conjugal ras is, Madhurya Ras is that of a conjugal lover. And conjugal lover means the relationship of a boyfriend and a girlfriend is beyond the boundaries of duty. Why is that higher than that of a husband and wife? Because the love between a husband and wife, this is a very primitive way to understand, because we are very materialistic by nature. So I'm just giving a very crude example for us to understand this very higher tenets of love or rasa with the Lord. So since all of us are married, we know what it is like to love our husband, but we also do it because of our duty. There is always a sense of duty between the love of a husband and wife. And there is also expectation. There is also expectation, you know, of being taken care of in return, and being treated well for being nice to our husband. So the love of a husband and wife is duty bound, but the relationship of a boyfriend and a girlfriend is not bound by any rules and regulations. You know, the boyfriend and girlfriend are no strings attached. Anyone can leave the other person and go any time, despite that person having devoted a lifetime to their partner. Still they are not bound by any written commitment or they haven't signed any papers. So yet to love a person selflessly and surrender yourself completely to the person is the pinnacle of love, which is where Radharani is the embodiment of this Madhurya Rasa. So the position of Radharani is higher than that of Vatsalya Ras Yashoda. And Yashoda acknowledges this, and therefore she calls Radharani every day to cook for her child, because she knows that Radharani loves him ahaituki apratihata, unconditionally. There is no condition whether Krishna loves her back or no. She is surrendered to him. Whether Krishna gives her time or no, she is surrendered to him. Whether Krishna meets her or leaves her and goes away, she loves him unconditionally. And she's forever praying for his, for his welfare. Hence, Madhurya Ras is the topmost relationship that anyone can share with the Lord. So these are the 5 primary rasas in descending order: Madhurya Ras, Vatsalya Ras, Sakhya Ras, Dasya Ras, and Shant Ras. And these are the 5 primary relationships that each jiva has with the Lord. However, we have forgotten this relationship because we have come in contact with material nature. We have forgotten. It's like when somebody meets an accident. I was recently reading someone that a lady met with an accident and she suddenly lost her memory. So although her son is coming and meeting her, she does not recognize him, neither her husband nor her grandchild. She has completely forgotten who they are and what is. So despite them being around her, she doesn't acknowledge them. And this is exactly what happens to us. We have been with Krishna in one of these relationships, but as soon as we met with an accident, by coming in contact with Maya, the material nature, we were struck with amnesia and we've forgotten everything, and therefore we are suffering. Because when you forget who your real mother is, how long can a surrogate mother give you the pleasure that you were getting from your real mother? So the material world and our attachments in the material world are like our duplicate relationships. And duplicate relationships therefore cannot satisfy our heart to the core, and therefore we are always hankering for happiness. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this verse is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Shant Dasya Sakhya Vatsalya Madhurya Rasa Namo Krishna Bhakti Rasa Madhye E Pancha Pradhana. The chief transcendental mellows experienced with the Supreme Personality of Godhead are 5. Shant, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. This is Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 19.185 and 19.187. Hasya Adbhut Vera Kraiva Rodra Bhasvata Bhaya Panchavidha Bhakte Gornya Sapta Rasahaya. In addition to these 5 direct mellows, direct rasas, there are 7 indirect mellows known as laughter, wonder, chivalry, compassion, anger, disaster, and fear. And as you read the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, or as you read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Leelas of Krishna, you will see each of these 7 rasas being enjoyed by the Gopas and the Gopis who spend their time in their life eternally. Till eternity, they are spending their time with Krishna and Radha. And they are experiencing all these 7 secondary rasas, such as laughter, wonder, when they play with him, chivalry, when they see how he comes to their rescue, how the damsels of Raja, the Gopis of Raja, when they see how he comes to their rescue. Compassion, anger, when they refuse to share their lunch or their possession with him, he feigns anger. They experience that disaster and fear. That's when the demons attack Brajadham, and they run to Krishna for help. And immediately Krishna comes to protect them, and she displays such heroic feats that they are struck with awe and wonder. So these are the seven indirect mellows. These also give them pleasure because they are also coming out of deep love and attachment for Krishna. So they are not to be confused with the ordinary mellows that we experience in the material world. The material world is a horrible place. So, but there is no disease, old age, death, and birth in the spiritual world. So imagine these seven rasas without these conditions of the material world, like birth, death, old age, and disease. Everybody is eternal, forever youthful. There is no disease there. And then they enjoy these 7 and 5, 12 rasas. Okay, next slide. So, everyone, each one of us, we are jivas, all of us, we are atmas. And each one of us has come from the Supreme Lord, from the Paramatma. We are all tiny, tiny fragments that have come from Him. So all of us have a unique relationship with Him, each one of us. What is the relationship that I have with the Supreme Lord is different from the relationship that you have and your children have and your husband has. So each one of us has our own unique place there. And that is called our real Swarup. And like I just shared that example with you, that we have been struck with amnesia because of this accident that we have come in contact with material nature. So we have forgotten what is that unique relationship. It is out of these 5, one of these. We do not remember them as of now because we are contaminated in the material world. However, once you start practicing Bhakti Yoga, that relationship is revived. And in due course of time, you will remember what is your original relationship with Krishna. And when you reach that position, it is called Swarup Siddhi, where each one of us has a name, a unique name in Golok Vrindavan. And we have our own family there, permanent. This is our permanent family there. And we have a unique relationship with Krishna. And this is what we are hankering after. This is what we are thirsting after. Our subconscious mind remembers that and is looking for that. But it is looking for that in the material world at the wrong place. So we are trying to find that deep satisfaction within our relationships here in the material world. But what we don't understand is that these relationships are temporary. The set of family and friends that we have now are only temporarily given to us for these 70, 80, 90 years. As soon as death snatches us out of this body, we will have a new set of parents, children, friends, and family. So these are not our permanent family. That is why we keep changing our families life after life after life. And that's why we continue to be unhappy, distressed, and hankering. There is always a thirst inside. That why am I not satisfied fully? What is it that I'm hankering? It is this Swarup that I'm hankering for, because I've already tasted it in the spiritual world. So I know what it tastes like, but now I'm trying to find that taste here and I'm not getting it. And that is what is making me morose and unhappy. This is the main cause of our unhappiness. The other unhappinesses are just secondary. Oh, my internet went off. Oh, my son couldn't get the marks that he wanted. This is the secondary unhappiness. The main unhappiness is this reason, that we are trying to find out that ras that we were enjoying there, and we're not able to find it here. And Bhakti Yoga is what is going to connect us back to our Swarup, our original permanent position in the spiritual world. And once we realize that, that state is called Swarup Siddhi. Next. So this is a verse from the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna Vacha, he tells Krishna, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narad, Asit, Deval, and Vyas confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me. So it's not that Krishna is saying, only Krishna is saying all these things about himself. All these authorized sages who are considered authority on the scriptures by all the leading religions of the world, namely Asit, Deval, Vyasadeva, and Narad, they are all confirming that no one but Krishna satisfies all this criteria of being Bhagwan, which is he is the absolute truth, he is the supreme enjoyer, he is eternal, he is transcendental. The meaning of transcend is beyond, to cross over. He is beyond this material world. He does not belong to this world. So he is from another world. The original Lord, the unborn. Krishna was never born. He is the cause of all causes, but nothing is the cause of him. Nothing caused him. He caused everything else. He was always there. So he is the Adi Purush, the oldest living entity, yet he never ages. So he is the Vibhum, the greatest, the unborn. He is accepted by all authorities in all scriptures as the supreme. Neither the demigods or the demons can understand your personality. You are the Param Brahma, the supreme truth, Param Dhama, the ultimate abode, Pavitram Paramam Bhavam, the purest, untainted by material contamination, the absolute truth, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. So you are Purusham, which means you are a supreme enjoyer. Shashvatam, Shashvat is eternal. You don't have to take birth because you never die. God, Krishna never dies. His presence on planet Earth 5,000 years back when he appeared was a manifestation like the sun. For example, the sun rose today morning, and now we are coming towards evening and the sun is going to set shortly. Can we say that, oh, the sun has died? It was born today morning and it has died, and tomorrow morning a new sun will be born? No, the sun is permanently there in the sky. It is we who are rising and setting. And therefore, it appears to us that the sun is being born and dying every day. The same is the situation with Krishna. He does not take birth on planet Earth. He just appears for a certain time for a specific purpose, and then he disappears out of his own will and cause, just like the appearance and disappearance of the sun. He does not take birth like an ordinary person. Many people confuse this and consider him to be an ordinary human being. People who have written commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita they write this translation, that he was just a historical figure who was born like an ordinary human being and then he died. It just shows that they have a poor fund of knowledge. They haven't really read the scriptures well. Because in the Gita itself, he says in the end, Janma karma chame divyam, evam yoveti tatvatah. My janam and my karam are divyam, are spiritual. They are not of this material world. Nor do I have to take birth from a father and a mother like us ordinary human beings. You will see that in the next picture. Next verse, next one, please. So how should the Bhagavad Gita be understood? It should be taken with the spirit of devotion. One should not think that he is equal to Krishna. So yogis have this, the goal of the yogis is to become equal to God. I want to merge into Him and become one with Him. So they can do that. They will achieve that also by merging into the Brahman, but they will merge into the sunshine. It is to be understood, the way to understand this is that a yogi at best will be able to understand how to merge into the sunshine, but he will never be able to understand where the sunshine came from, what is the source of this sunshine, and he will never be able to reach the sun planet, and he will never be able to understand the sun god residing on that sun planet. At best, he will be in the sunshine or the Brahma Jyoti. And because of lack of service there or lack of engagement, yogis again fall down into the cycle of birth and death. So it is not a very safe position. So it's really up to us and our intelligence whether we really want to take that position, because it's not permanent. One should not think Krishna as an ordinary personality or even very great personality, but Krishna is, he's not great, he's not ordinary, he is the supreme personality of Godhead. There is no one bigger or greater than him. He is the one and only. One trying to study Bhagavad Gita should at least theoretically accept Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead to begin with, just to understand the science behind how this universe works. It will be in your best interest if you accept theoretically that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And one should read Bhagavad Gita in a submissive spirit, else it's very difficult to understand it because it is a great mystery. Although it's an open book and it is freely available everywhere, yet this is Guhyam Guhyatam, which means that it is the most secretive or confidential knowledge. And this confidential knowledge can be revealed, the secret can be revealed only by a devotee of Krishna who understands the heart or the mind of Krishna. A well-wisher of Krishna can convey, can solve this mystery for us. So even though it is freely available, it cannot be easily understood. It will remain a mystery, and your attitude will be the make or break of your situation to understand it or to get more confused. So attitude is everything here. Next one. So the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita, why did Krishna speak the Bhagavad Gita? One is, of course, the parampara, the disciplic succession was broken. Misinterpretation had started. So that was one of the reasons. He could not see the suffering of people from the threefold miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. So he wanted to deliver people from this material existence. Hence, he spoke this again. Then every man is full of difficulty and anxiety in the material world. We are put into this temporary situation, whereas we are eternal. And out of so many suffering, some inquires why suffering, and they want to know the solution. There are genuine seekers, like all of you, I would say. Each one of you are actually genuine seekers. You are trying to search the truth of your existence. Why are we here? Is this just the sum total of my life, just because my parents did it and my grandparents did it and I am also supposed to do the same thing and then die? Somewhere these questions are troubling us and we want to know the answers. And that's why to those sincere seekers, the Bhagavad Gita has been spoken for them. It is for those seekers. Athato Brahma Jigyasa, those who have Jigyasa, curiosity for the supreme, for the spiritual purpose, the higher purpose of life. For such sincere students, the Bhagavad Gita has been spoken. Next one. Yeah. So here you can see in this picture very clearly that Krishna first appeared as this four-handed form of Narayan in front of Vasudeva and Devaki. And he told them he appeared first from the mind of Vasudeva. He reached the mind of Devaki, and then he took this form. So immediately both Vasudeva and Devaki bowed down to him and paid their obeisances. And then they said, wait a minute, but you're supposed to be our son. How can we feel, affection as parents for you if you're standing like this in front of us? So you please take the form of a baby. We cannot relate to you like this. And that's when he took that form of the small baby. So this is the truth behind his appearance. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. He did not take birth like you and me. We have to take birth from parents because we have karmic reactions. Therefore, we have to take birth from a specific womb because we have to repay their debts. But Krishna has no debt. He has no karma. He does not have to atone for any sins. Hence, he does not have to take birth like us. This is the fact about his appearance. Okay, next one. These are the 5 subject matters. Baldev Vidyabhushan has written in his Bhashya, Govind Bhashya, that these are the 5 subject matters that the Bhagavad Gita deals with. Ishwar, which means the literal meaning of Ishwar is controller. We are all controllers, all of us. We have some minute control. We can control some things in our life. We can control some people, our children we try to control. So that is the meaning of controller. But the controller of all controllers is called Parameshwar. So that's the difference between Ishwar and Parameshwar. So the Bhagavad Gita will go in depth on this concept of what is Ishwar, who qualifies to be called Ishwar, and who is Parameshwar. Then Jiva. Jiva is all of us, all the living entities who are parts and parcels or fragments of that Parameshwar. Prakriti is nature. The nature that is the nurturing mother. The Sanskrit or the literal meaning of Prakriti is enjoyment. So Prakriti ka vilom shabd hai Purush. So these are antonyms. हम एग्जाम में करते हैं ना, say the opposite. What is the opposite of good? Bad. What is the opposite of beautiful? Ugly. उसी तरह what is the opposite of Purush? Prakriti. And what is the meaning? Purush is the enjoyer and Prakriti is the enjoyment. Enjoyed. So Krishna is the enjoyer and Prakriti is the enjoyed. This is the truth of the scriptures. Once you understand this concept, it's a very deep concept. You will see that automatically you will be relieved of your anxiety and depression. Most of us don't know. All of us believe that we have come here to enjoy. We are privileged, or it is our birthright to enjoy. हम यहाँ पर enjoy करने आए हैं. And therefore we are suffering. Because we are actually the Prakriti. We are meant to be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord. And in turn, we become even more joyful than the Lord himself. This is a fact. Just by serving Lord Krishna, the Gopas and Gopis and Radharani are enjoying so much supreme bliss that Krishna has started wondering that what kind of enjoyment are they getting just by serving me, just by surrendering themselves to me. They seem to be more happy than me. This is the position of Prakriti. So in our materialistic mind, we may feel that, trying to become a servant is a demeaning position and how can we ever be happy in being a servant? But the position of Prakriti is higher than that of Parameshwar. The enjoyment that Prakriti feels is actually much higher than that of a Parameshwar. And we will see in the Bhagavad Gita how practically that can be done and how it has to be understood. Then is Karam. We know a lot about Karam. In India, everybody knows what Karam is, activity. But Bhagavad Gita is going to tell you in detail exactly what activity you're supposed to be doing and what activity you are not supposed to be doing for your own good and welfare. And Kal is time. Time is Krishna. Time is, of course, in the material world, we are taught time is money. But in the spiritual world, time is Krishna. Next slide. Yeah, so this is more of the same thing. Like I just did in the previous slide, these are the 5 activities. Prakriti ke niche, you can see this picture of the 3 ladies. This is material nature, Sattva, Rajo and Tamo. These are the 3 Prakritis, and all of us are bound by all 3 of them like puppets. That's the material nature. And she is directly serving Lord Krishna and working under his guidance. So it is in our interest to work in cooperation with Prakriti so that we can have a peaceful and happy life. So from this slide, the thing to note down is that the first 4, Ishwar, Jiva, Prakriti and Kal, are eternal. New one. No, just please hold. Yeah, sorry. So Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti and Kal are eternal. Whereas Karam is not eternal. Because Karam is related to this material body, and the material body is temporary. Hence, Karam is also temporary, which means it can be changed. You have control, you can change your Karam, and hence you can change the outcome of your Karam. The repercussion of your Karam can also be changed. But the other 4 cannot be changed. Next. That's a lovely picture. This is the picture of what God looks like. Supreme Godhead or Krishna or Brahman or Supreme Controller or Paramatma or Supreme Consciousness is the greatest of all. So Madhurya Ras actually has all the remaining 4 rasas within it. Madhurya Ras also has Vatsalya Ras, also has Sakhya Ras, also has Dasya Ras, also has Shant Ras. All in one. Therefore, it's the highest and the greatest form of love of God. Whereas Shant Ras will not have the ones above it. Therefore, it is at the position of number 5, then number 4, and then number 3 onwards. So Krishna is similarly we did the 3 form of people, yogis, meditators and bhaktas. So a bhakt will be able to enjoy the position of a yogi and a meditator both. But a yogi will not be able to understand what is meditating on Paramatma and what is the position of a bhakta. And similarly, the meditator will not be able to understand what a bhakta feels, but a bhakt will be able to understand all three positions. So the position of a bhakt is has more advantages over the others. Next one. I think we'll stop here. That's enough for today.